Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Autistic Tidbits and Tangents podcast. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Bruce Petherick, and a special guest I'm so excited to talk to today, my friend Rozarina Md Yusof Howton. Now, I will introduce myself first. I'm Cara Diamond. I'm an autistic teacher, university lecturer, and author from Toronto, Canada. Co-host?
My name is Bruce Petherick. I am the autistic advocate, Autism Canada. Previously, I was a professional musician, and don't tell anybody, but I've actually been doing gigs this week. And I live in Vancouver, and I'm going to be eternally giggling every time Cara says, welcome back, because it's like, I haven't gone anywhere.
And then, of course, we have Roza. Now, Rozarina was born in Malaysia. She did her first degree in London, UK in medical physics. And at the time, school was interrupted because she was experiencing burnout as a result of being autistic without knowing that at the time that she was autistic. She is now an autistic graduate student at McGill University in the Department of Experimental Medicine. Her research interests include the use of wearables to improve health outcomes. We have bonded over cats, dinosaurs. She also likes playmobil models and wood whittling. So a person of many talents.
Wood whittling.
Welcome, Roza.
Hi. Okay. I just gone through a pretty stressful 14 days because it's end of term with lots of deadlines and presentations. So if I kind of sound incoherent, it's because my brain is still a bit disconnected with my mouth. So I might spontaneously sing or do echolalia weird bits. So great, Scott, let's get on with it.
Let's do that. We completely understand. And I think that's important to note because that's part of the topic we're talking about today, the cost of masking and the burnout that can sort of ensue from that.
Welcome to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.
Candid conversations between autistic off-hour professionals.
Cool.
Trigger warnings for this episode include discussions of ableism and dismissiveness toward autistic experiences in schools, the medical field, and society at large, insufficient anesthesia, and a few curse words.
It's so weird. You can cognitively tell yourself you're not looking down at a grizzly bear. Why are you reacting this way? And whatever methods that worked before COVID to kind of bring my equilibrium point back don't work anymore. So that's one issue that I find very, very, very challenging.
So it really affected your nervous system, you'd say? I mean, affects every system to have long COVID.
Yeah.
Actually, let's start on that question. We all have our methods of grounding.
Or self-regulating.
Self-regulating, okay. Is there an expectation that they stay constant throughout our lives?
Listening to you probably know this guy. What's his name? Autism on the Inside, podcaster, life coach. What's his name? Oh God,
I'm Googling.
Autism on the Inside, Australian guy.
I've seen him, Christopher something.
Oh yes,
Autism from the Inside, Christopher.
Is it Chris McCallum or something?
I'm on his website. I see his face. I'm just trying to find his name. What's your name?
His name is so hard to remember, isn't it?
It's not Chris at all. Sorry, I lied. He looks like a Chris to me. Paul McCallum.
Paul, yes. That's why it's so hard to remember. Pauls are always so hard to remember.
That's so funny.
When he spoke to some of the older autistic people that he got on his podcast, they all described that the symptoms of the sensory profile. You become more sensitive as you age. But I found COVID really accelerated it to the point that light hurts.
Yes.
Like my eyes could be closed, but if I feel light falling on my skin, it hurt.
Wow. And I've heard that, like, I know other autistic people with long COVID who also their sensory systems have really suffered even more than they were suffering before.
What fun it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm saying that with tremendous irony because before I got COVID, I kind of already predicted this would happen, as in people with POTS, with dysautonomia, MCAS, Ehlers-Danlos, autism deteriorating wasn't on my radar at the time. But because when I was reading the paper on COVID, at the time, the company I was working with pivoted from, this is another discussion topic, really, really kind of very hot. I kind of threw a tantrum. So the company pivoted from using wearables that has haptic buzzing to get autistic kids to do tasks.
Explain
Sorry,
more. We
my
both
face
look
leaves
really
me
puzzled.
more blank. Yes.
It's, for example, if you're in school and you're supposed to do your math homework, and if the kid gets kind of sidetracked or distracted, they're using the wearables to vibrate to get the kid back on task. To me, that is like a shock collar.
Yeah. I mean, part of me is like, maybe I would like that for myself sometimes, but not all the time. And it's like,
and not on kids.
And not on children who don't have control over
and
when they use
consent.
it. Yeah, they can't consent.
And the original design was they want to make it such that the kids cannot take it off.
Oh, that's awful.
Oh, God, the fit that I threw. Oh, God, I've been holding this inside for so long. And I'm so glad I can talk with people who would understand how outraged I was at the time.
Yeah. It's one thing if it's a choice, like how I might use it if I was like, I want to do writing this afternoon. I'm going to set an alarm for 2 hours and let's have it vibrate if I start checking my phone. You know what I mean? Like if I get sidetracked.
Yeah.
But to do that on children and have them not be able to remove it, to single them out, to like, there's just so many problems with that.
There's so many problems on that, like, and I'm
and
moving my hands.
Issue, because it was approved by the REB in the university. I won't name the university. It's not McGill, by the way. And supposedly it's by the Occupational Therapy Research Center of that university. It was approved by the REB. There's only one autistic on the panel of the REB.
Wow.
No one else in that whole proof of concept was autistic. I threw a fit.
Good for
because, I have a feeling they hired me just so they have an autistic stamp of approval on it.
Yeah.
And the easy route was to just quit. But I knew if I don't kind of make them see that, don't even go there. Do not. Just do not. For God's sake, do not go there.
Yeah. Well, and this is like what we were saying a few episodes ago too, Bruce, about how, it's easy to walk away from the table or not come to the table if there are people proposing things we disagree with, but then we don't have a voice at that table.
Yeah.
And they feel like everything they're proposing is perfectly legitimate and they don't see the harms that they could be perpetuating. So I want to thank you, Roza. Like, that's really incredible that you took that on, and that the burden that would have come with that too is having to be that solitary voice and staring down the grizzly bear.
I never thought of it that way. That is a perfect description.
Well, and actually, let's talk about this grizzly bear analogy, because it actually stems from a real encounter that you had with a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know this.
There. Oh, we've been messaging back and forth.
Okay.
So.
Oh, Bruce is jealous now. He wants in.
Not of the grizzly bear.
What? No grizzlies here. I bet.
Okay.
When I was living in Calgary, I used to hunt whitetail and mule deer around some of the Crown Land, close to Kananaskis, with my husband and his best friend. Oddly enough, his name is Paul.
No, I know Paul from Calgary. Yeah.
And lovely guy, really. But he had an accident when he was younger. His car was rear-ended, so he had some brain injury, and so he gets this really he became really weird afterwards. So we call him Poopy Pants because he always see everything in a negative light. So it's kind of like a traumatic brain injury in effect to him. That's another
tough.
story.
Yeah.
So grizzly bear. Paul and Andrew went off to hike to look over Moose Mountain to see if they can find any deer signs and check the cameras there. And I was sitting around at the place that I usually kind of have my my station for. And that afternoon, quiet, enjoying just meditating and chilling out in the woods, talking back and forth between the ravens and watching them feeling a bit fucked up, going, I hear a raven, but I can't see him.
Mm-hmm.
And then a mama grizzly came in. How far was she? Maybe about 20 meters.
Wow.
And even if I have a rifle, because I was hunting deer, and it was a 504, so it has a pretty hefty bullet on it.
Okay.
But if she charged me, even with the rifle, that's it.
Yeah.
So we kind of stared at each other. It's the longest 5 seconds of my life. And then she kind of huffed a few times and then just thought maybe I'm too much hassle, and she walked off.
Wow. Well, and you were relaying this to me because you were saying your recent presentation put you in that same state, but for obviously much longer than the 5 seconds of staring down the grizzly bear.
Yeah. And because I knew presentations were always stressful for me, well, I've been wearing, I don't want to make it sound like a product endorsement ad, but I have a Garmin wearable because this particular one has barometric pressure monitor on it as well. So when the weather change and if there's a snowstorm coming or if there's rain coming, you can see the barometric pressure drop in a really steep curve.
Wow.
And I'm going to show you. I'm going to take it off and show you through the camera.
Awesome.
It's so cool. Look at the drop in barometric pressure.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Yes. And usually barometric pressure, when it falls like that or has really abrupt signatures like that, my brain goes offline and I have a lot more sensory interference.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
This is where Kara and we were kind of bouncing this idea about shamans, weather shamans especially. They are likely autistic because think about it. When you have weather sensitivity, like right now, because of the pressure change, my nerves feel all tingly. Like it feels like nerve pain, but not quite. I'm sure you understand this. And it just makes me want to jump around and rattle and shake and, put heavy things on my head.
Yeah.
Think about weather shamans wearing big buffalo headdresses, wearing heavy masks with rattles, prancing around the fire like a goblin. And then soon after, there's a snowstorm or rain. And so the tribe call it, you're a weather shaman. Wow. Actually, no, it's weather sensitive.
Can you tell me about shamanism and Malaysian culture?
It's, we call it hyperempathy. that's the Western terminology to it.
Okay.
Like in my family clan line, usually in every generation, there'll be one or two in that generation who will be so hyper empathetic with everyone within the clan and outside of the clan. And guess what? A lot of people in my clan line are autistic.
Wow.
So it became like this huge bloodline of autistic people meeting other autistic people and marrying each other.
Yeah.
So you have this very heritable trait and unfortunately also very heritable diseases passed down in each generation. People in my family, we kind of fit into that profile of autistic, having that lifespan of 46 to 52 years. Spot on. That's us right there.
Well, we do have so many comorbidities, so many more autoimmune disorders, heightened long COVID risk, like all sorts of things.
And that's where I kind of had to fight for this master's project a little bit with my supervisor. He's a really nice guy, don't get me wrong. I really love his work, but I kind of know that we have increased risk for heart failure and diabetes, because I kind of been scanning the literature and I've been noticing the paper in 2016 by the Swedish, is it Swedish? I think so. Swedish group saying that there's a higher rate for cardiovascular and type 2 diabetes, with the female usually having worse health outcomes, lots higher death rates as well. And then coincidentally early this year, 2023, paper by Dennis Sakara saying that, yes, autistic people are actually at very high risk for type 2 diabetes and heart failure. It is something that we have known for, at least 20 years, maybe. Well, at least in my family, we knew that.
Yeah.
You have the healthiest lifestyle, but you're still dying of heart attack in your late 40s.
Now, I wonder, I can only speculate, obviously not having a medical doctorate or medical background in any way. But I do think that we are more stressed out in general for greater amounts of time. Do you think that has an impact on our heart function?
This is where I hope the master's project that I'll be working on will start something that could shed some light into why that is.
Yeah.
Because we know that we have the higher risks, but there is so many contributing factors to it, like, as you said, autoimmune diseases. And I didn't know I have celiac disease until I was 35.
Wow.
Because it is, quote unquote, according to literature, it is supposedly very rare in Asians. Guess what? Celiac disease in Asian tend to be the seronegative type. The common blood test won't pick it up.
Yeah.
It's not that it's rare, you're using the wrong test.
Wow. That's
There's also two of my family had celiac, and there was a researcher in the previous city who was doing some work looking at gluten production of wheat in Asia versus Europe, and noting that there was a substantial molecular difference between the way gluten looked in an Asian wheat against European wheat. And I'm wondering if that factors into what you've just said, that
it could be
that there is celiac there, but it's not inflamed as much because of the difference of the wheat. But there are other things, of course, the barleys, etc. That,
And would that have been something that you got diagnosed? I'm assuming at 35 you were not living in Malaysia, so maybe you'd been eating more.
at the time I've already moved to Canada, and it got so bad that I'm starting to develop the typical celiac rash, but not just on my hands. It's kind of like all over. So it was pretty nasty.
Wow.
And my geneticist at the time said, that kind of looks like a celiac rash. Humor me, go gluten-free for a while, see what happens.
Wow.
And it cleared up. All my celiac panel has been negative, except by elimination. So,
there you go.
So this is where autistic health issues don't really fit into the general population diagnostic definition usually.
And I know just anecdotally that we can have so both Maya and I, for instance, have talked about having like if I'm having anything done that requires freezing, whether it's dental. I once had something with my eyelid where I had to get something like lanced a little bit on my eyelid. I had another operation. I can always feel it, and they will always give me more freezing, and I will still feel it.
Yes, because local anesthetic don't work very well if you have Ehlers-Danlos loss.
And I don't have a diagnosis of that, but I do have some of the characteristics.
Hypermobility traits.
I have hypermobility in some of my joints, not all of them, and so that's really interesting. Something else.
So, because here's the working theory behind what we think happens, why freezing doesn't work. Ehlers-Danlos is a hereditary connective tissue disorder. So your connective tissue is not formed normally, like the rest of us. We're marbles, right? So what happens is the integrity of tissue is different. It's more fragile. It's more lax. There's a lot more gaps, if you like, between the basal layers and the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So for a normal person, you inject an anesthetic, the anesthetic stays in the region.
Okay.
But for us, you inject anesthetic. If you have really, really porous tissue, what happens? You go. So the numbing doesn't work where you injected it. It diffused down.
Wow.
So whenever I go to dentist, my jaws, because they have to put a lot of numbing, and by the end, even my vocal cords be paralyzed.
Oh my gosh. I made my dentist jump like one time when he was doing work on something, and I was like, oh, and he was like, I already double froze you. How did you feel that?
3.
Like,
you need at least 3.
Wow.
Yes, Bruce. Sorry, Bruce. You were trying to say something.
Well, no, I was going to say, when we're talking about freezing, would that also any type of anesthetic would be like that, wouldn't it?
I've been
anesthetic,
okay.
I should say.
Like I've had my tonsils out. I've had a few things where I've been completely put under, and that has been fine. But anything local, anything local, I'm like, I can feel everything you're doing.
Yes, and there's actually a good reason for that. And this thing, we as in the Ehlers-Danlos community, we've known this since, early 2000, because where I was, UCL, I should thank the lucky stars. I went to UCL instead of any other of the other universities that was offered, because it so happened it's the one place where the University College Hospital has the rheumatologist who specializes in Ehlers-Danlos.
Oh, perfect.
And the pieces fell into place. It's like, wow, that's why I'm so clumsy. But I play sports. I don't injure myself during sports. I injure myself rolling on a carrot that's on a kitchen.
Right.
It's like the killer carrot tried to kill me.
Yeah.
Actually, you must excuse me. I actually have to go and do a differential right now.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay.
Differential diagnosis. I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
All right. No problem. We'll keep chatting. Interesting.
Differential diagnosis of what, I wonder?
I think Bruce realized after the last episode where I took a break and stepped away, he was like, oh, we can do this now.
Oh, right. Okay.
I don't know. So that's really interesting. Now, so Ehlers-Danlos. Now, at the time when you got that diagnosis, did you know you were autistic? Like, how did your autism diagnosis come about?
It came after that.
After that. Mm-hmm.
Because my rheumatologist at the time, Professor Graham, he got an OBE because of his relentless work speaking out for disabled patients. He noticed that in a lot of his hypermobile clinic patients, a lot of them are neurodiverse.
Wow.
And at the time, I burnt out of my first PhD at UCL. And I still kind of thank my lucky stars I burnt out there. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise my paths would not have crossed with him. Yeah. And the fact that he knew a lot of neurodiverse people with connective tissue diseases, he recognized that I am burnt out, and I am a burnt out autistic, and not some other mental diagnosis I had at the time. And that diagnosis was taken off.
Wonderful. And how did you feel getting the right identification?
Relieved, but also sad, because initially I resisted the diagnosis because, the media does not cover autism very well. There's so much stigma to it. And I resisted so hard until Dr. Tony Atwood's book, The
Complete Guide to Asperger's Syndrome? Yeah.
That was the book that described so many of the difficulties and why it's happening.
Yeah.
It's like somebody handed you a user manual to yourself. Yeah. And then I think I read that book maybe 5 or 6 times. Yeah. It's like, wow, it's like a bestseller novel. I read it cover to cover. And I read it again. And I read it, repetition. Like you're autistic or something.
You're so funny. You always make me laugh. I'm going to tell you another book. I'll send it to you by text as well. But Bruce just sent me a book. He said that I have to buy. It's called, I'm going to show it, Is This Autism? A Guide for Clinicians and Everyone Else. Okay. And he said it's like the best description of autism, like very non-judgmental. It's by Donna Henderson and Sarah Wayland with Jamel White.
The name sounds very familiar.
Yeah. I think it's relatively new in the last couple of years, I think.
Okay.
Anyways, but that would probably have a similar effect where you recognize yourself in the pages.
Yeah.
Which is a powerful experience, I think.
And it kind of saddened me that it took so long for the medical community to actually be able to suddenly move beyond this typical definition of, oh, you can't be autistic. You just looked at me in the eye. You can't be autistic. Yeah. You're empathetic.
Yeah.
You can't be autistic. You're too, friendly, sociable. You went to school. You have a job. Yeah. But the price that I pay for that, the price that we pay for it, trying to pretend to be neurotypical.
Yeah. It's a high one.
Yeah. Is what the clinicians don't see.
And it's a high price in 2 respects. Obviously burnout, which we will talk a lot about today. But there's the other side, like as someone who my whole life has really tried to hide all the things that are hard for me. It's like people don't necessarily believe that there are things that you struggle with and that are inordinately hard for you, that like cause you such distress and anguish in private. Well, sometimes not in private, but I hide it well. Like I have really trained myself from childhood. I remember being like, I think the other children really want reactions out of me when they do these things to me. So I'm just going to like play it cool. My face is not going to change. I'm going to try not to jump or flinch or anything. And I now have a very well practiced look of calm, even though I am never calm. Like on the inside, I'm vibrating like this all of the time. Like I'm just like, so I have such an anxious energy on the inside, but I don't show it. And so people have no idea what my internal experiences are.
That's the thing. You learned to mask so early, especially if you're late diagnosed. You're not even sure what you're feeling anymore.
Oh, that is so spot on, Roza.
Like the presentation that really, 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 really stressed me out happened on Monday. And it took until last night for me to figure out it actually felt like staring down a grizzly bear.
Yes.
It's fear. And it took me, 5 days to
really pinpoint that it was the same feeling.
Yeah, to kind of, it's like you're doing this magic image, the magic eye of drawing, and you're trying to resolve, what is that image that I'm seeing? What is that emotion that's really bothering me in this background? I can't put a word to it.
What a good analogy. I totally know what you mean, because I'm the same. So I can obviously understand, if I'm excited or happy, I can identify those emotions pretty easily, but anything like to do with stress or to do with an emotion that is like complex or, involving sadness, frustration, anger, like all of those, terror, I freeze, and it will take me a long time to figure out what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. And even what
triggered it.
And what triggered it. And I pick up other people's feelings too. So I will sometimes feel their feelings first. And then it'll be like 3 or 4 days later before I go, actually, I really didn't like that. Why did I agree to that? Or why did it's something just sort of like quelches my own instincts.
I'll have to rewind and listen to this podcast.
It was real good when you were gone, Bruce.
Actually, the best things always happen when you're gone.
I hope this is on the same subject. And here Bruce just comes in going, wow, wow, wow. You are raising something. I'm reading an absolutely wonderful book right now, which I will share a little later.
I think I just shared it. Is this autism?
Yes.
Good. There you go.
I told Roza you recommended that book, but you can talk a little bit about it too later if you would like.
So the point, adjoining to what you've just talked about, they are talking about. If I get the reference wrong, I apologize. It's the correct sort of subject area. They're talking about, I think, empathy and how we can read. The fundamental point is they were saying that we can read the energy of a room, but we don't understand why it's occurring. And it's like, what does energy mean? But that's exactly what you've just talked about, isn't it? Like, Cara, you've just said that. You have picked the energy up, there's something, and then 3 days later it's like, oh, it was because of this, or that's how I'm feeling.
I had a student like a couple of weeks ago say that they got really upset in class because they could hear 2 children arguing outside of their classroom. So they picked up on other people's states outside of the room, and it impacted them. And it's just like, there's
oral
that
hyperacuity.
Yeah, hyperacuity, hyperempathy, taking on those emotions.
You're just sensitive.
Right? Yeah. Here we go, myth busting about autism, eh?
Yeah, it is surprising how many supposedly really clear-cut definition of symptoms is actually not that clear-cut. It's like hallucinations, like visual and auditory hallucinations. The doctor asks you, you say you hear people talking. What are they talking about? They are arguing about medicine. Why? Because Mr. A does not agree with Dr. C that he should take 5 grams of lithium, whatever. And that's when the doctor keyed in. Wait a minute.
You can hear what's the conversation 2 rooms down the hallway.
Exactly.
Mm.
And visual hallucination. Some days my visual acuity and processing is so, I don't want to say fast, but so the brakes are removed. I see hexagons floating in my field of vision.
You see the matrix.
Here is where it gets interesting.
Cones and rods. You're seeing the cones and rods.
Yeah.
Bruce is right. Ding, 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 ding. It's the structure of the cellular arrangement of the cones and rods in the retina.
Wow.
I think that is what I'm seeing.
That's incredible.
I've heard people doing that before. And in fact, the person that I was actually, this could have even been a lecturer when someone was describing this, and the lecturer went, "Oh yes, it's cones and the rods," and like, yeah, blah blah blah. But it's like, hang on a minute, that's pretty amazing. Like, why? That's
exactly. We're not hallucinating. We're perceiving the structure of our retina.
Yeah, like, perceiving things differently.
How sensitive is your visual system? Could be to be able to perceive your own cellular. You're seeing the cellular matrix. Got you there.
Wow.
When I was I had some serious surgery. My inner ear had to be rebuilt due to
I'm flinching in sympathy.
Right?
Due to a music. It was actually to do with being in too loud rooms.
Yeah.
Yes. And okay. And whatever. That's irrelevant. So I was under for, we were talking about a complete reconstruction. So a number of hours. And the doctor, when they woke me up, said, "You smiled a lot, and that's not supposed to happen." And I said, "I was really enjoying the music." And he went, "What?" I said, "Oh, you were playing this, this, and this," and I was recomposing it. And he's going, "You're not supposed to be able to do that." I went, "Oh, no." And I listed off like 3 or 4 songs. And he said, "That was like an hour ago."
Yes, you're supposed to be out. That happened to me as well. I had my ankle reconstruction surgery a few years back, and I really freaked out my surgeon, because in the follow-up appointment after the surgery, about maybe a month afterwards, I walked in, didn't walk in, I crutched in, hobbled in, if you like. And I told him, "Doctor, I feel flattered that you sang The Lion Sleeps Tonight just before you operated on me." His jaws just dropped.
Oh my goodness. So we've all astonished doctors. We've also shared stories today about that. That's fascinating. Oh my goodness.
I can still hear and subconsciously remember that, even when technically I was under anesthetic.
Wow.
So what's going on? Like,
exactly.
And to be
that
clear,
is supposed to be impossible. You're supposed to be, your consciousness is supposed to be completely disrupted at a point.
Yeah. And right. I'll quite happily say I was under no pain. Like, they were in my brain. Well, not in my brain, but close enough. They were cutting bits. It's like, if it wasn't working, they would be screaming. But it was like I felt no discomfort.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
I mean, post-surgery, that's a different thing.
Oh my gosh.
Not only could I hear, but I was actively hearing, because I said I was recomposing.
Yeah.
I was singing the counter chorus in my head when I heard my surgeon.
Oh my gosh. Like, one of my biggest fears is being under for something more major and feeling it the way I felt the smaller things. And it's like, so I'm like, please, never.
I'm glad I didn't feel the pain, but the lion sleeps tonight, and I was singing with him.
Wow.
in my head.
I want to ask you though about
have so much in common. It is so crazy.
so you wore your wearables while you were preparing for and delivering your presentation.
Yeah.
So what did you like? What was that like? What did you learn?
I knew I was going to be stressed, but I was really, let's just say, what I saw, because I self-blinded, nothing to do with poking my eyes out with forks. No, it means I don't look at the results of my wearables until several days post the event, so I don't influence the result and the days before and the days after. You kind of do your own self-control, right? That sounded really weird, self-control. Anyway, I knew I was going to be stressed, but I didn't realize how stressful it was. I'm going to pull up the app. The recording for the presentation, the final version number 18, was the only version that I managed to finish in one recording continuously. The 17 version previously did not go very well. This is one of the versions.
Wow.
Those red marks, this is from my Garmin wrist wearable. This is from version recording, I think 4 and 5 and 6. I tried 3 times that day.
Wow.
And those red marks is because I've already put a threshold on the app to indicate your heart is kind of increasing in heart rate too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it went off, I think, like 40 something times that day.
Wow.
And even though I didn't look at the results, I kind of knew something was up. I was pushing it too hard because when you have that many palpitations in one day, it hurt.
Wow.
It really hurt. Like the odd palpitation feels like a goldfish flopping in your heart. Yeah. This is a very famous, very non-Likert scale description of what palpitation feels like. Oh God, doctor, I have a goldfish flopping in my chest. And the doctor looks at you, what?
But analogies work so much better for me than Likert scales.
Exactly. And I'm going to
Is it a goldfish? Is it an elephant? Is it a giraffe in your heart? Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to. This is another app that I use to track long COVID symptoms, actually. And it also measures heart rate with the camera on your cell phone. And one of the measures that I like to track on this app is how my fever flares up with stress. And also it tracks this very wonderful parameter called heart rate variability. It can kind of give you a rough measure of how stressed out you are. So high heart rate variability, good. Low heart rate variability, bad, because it means your heart is not coping very well. So usually anything above 70 above is you're healthy. If you're below 70, around between 50 to 70, you're you need improvement. Below 50, you have a disease going on. Below 30 is associated with usually really bad outcomes. The top graph is the heart rate variability from the past 2 weeks, trying to prepare for the presentation.
Okay.
And they are pretty low. And it correlates inversely with occurrences of fever. Because I have long COVID, every time I push myself too hard, triggers a fever effect. Like it's almost as if I develop some symptoms of COVID again. Like I get chest pains, I get rash, fatigue, and really intense noise and visual sensitivity. Oh, like right now I have to put on I call it my Emmett Brown goggles. Great Scott.
They look wonderful.
So the fact that the heart rate variability really drops to, I'm going to zoom it in a little bit because otherwise you can't see it. At some point, it went low, very low.
Wow.
And it really correlated with the days that I felt today is too hard for me, but I'm still pushing it because I've got, I don't know, end of term deadlines. You have to do the recording. And at each iteration of the recording, I kind of pay attention to, I can't pronounce this word, so I have to find a different word and restructure the sentence. So it was 17 iteration to get to the iteration number 18.
Wow.
So this is where I find, for the first time in my life, I feel envious of non-autistic people who they find presentations scary, but not to the extent that their chest hurts and they feel like they're about to have a heart attack.
And they probably don't rehearse and practice
17 times.
At least 17 times, right?
Actually, there was a question as you were describing this.
Mm-hmm.
You're describing, I'm going to say the word normal, the average.
The general average population.
But you're describing something that every general population, average person goes through with stress. Heart variability goes down, temperature spiking. Okay, cool. That's a general population normal response. What is it that's making it so difficult for you and for many autistics? It's like
this kind of
go on.
I've read in some online the autistic Reddit group, a lot of us also say that when they are sensory overwhelmed, especially, they tend to get fevers afterwards. And fever is an inflammatory response.
Mm-hmm.
Is the sensory stresses enough such that it triggers an inflammation response? And that's why it leads to us having so many issues with our health.
And so many of the issues are like inflammation based.
Stress related.
Yeah.
Yes, it is stress related. And also, a lot of autistics also have really weird sleeping times, right? Like I'm a night owl.
Yeah.
My best functioning time is after sundown until about 3 a.m. And I tend to sleep from 3 until about 10 or 11. If you force me to sleep in a normal sleeping time, I wouldn't recharge. And my wearable data set shows it. Like the best sleep I get is between 5 to 10. Yeah. That's when I recharge. If I have a 8 a.m. lecture, that's it. My REM sleep is completely out of the window for the night.
I need to get me some wearables. I was just having a conversation with Bruce because I have the worst sleep ever. I've gone for 2 different sleep apnea tests, where they hook you up, but I didn't sleep enough that they could find anything. And in Ontario, it's only covered once a year. And he basically was like, you've done 2 and you probably just shouldn't come back. So I took him literally and I haven't gone back and I still have terrible sleep.
Actually, this is where the democratization of these devices is helpful. Like an Apple Watch or a Garmin or whatever. I mean, yes, they're a little expensive, but they're not ridiculous expensive. And this could solve, you could grab enough data to go to a sleep specialist and say, look, I know this is not clinically correct, but it's pretty damn close. This is where we're getting.
It doesn't even have to be really high sensitivity and specificity around 95. No, it doesn't even have to be that way. The wearable data can just show enough days showing same trends happening for the doctors to tell you, Roza, you're working too hard. You need to take holiday this winter. No working. My doctor's already given me a warning. They looked at my data and they're not happy.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, being told off by your doctor when you work with wearables and you tell him your own data and they're like, Roza, we need you live.
Yeah, we do. We do, Roza. That's so fascinating, though, about the presentation and the physical toll that it took on you, and that we have, like, you have visual evidence that it wasn't just a presentation. It was staring down a grizzly bear.
Yes, it felt exactly like that. And it is also very interesting that it kind of brings up to our Thing of the Day article.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought it up.
From Erica Sanborn. I hope she watches this podcast. Hi, Erica.
I'll try to tag her. So this is an article called What is Bottom-Up Thinking in Autism by Dr. Erica Sanborn. Roza brought it to my attention, and it's an awesome read. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, Roza?
I think I'll let you.
Okay. So this,
on that.
And then I know we'll have lots of extension. So this is an article all about how autistics process differently. So, and it ties to our experiences in school, and especially in graduate school. Autistics process usually through bottom-up thinking. So this is an inductive process. It tends to be, we collect tons and tons of information, and then later we kind of have to filter it out, categorize it, come to some understanding of what the data is. Whereas schools tend to operate under the assumption that everyone uses top-down thinking. So there's a great example in the article about when the author was in school, they were told by their teacher that they had to come with an outline for an essay on dolphins. And they said to the teacher, like, I can't do an outline. I don't know what's going to be in the paper, which is totally something I would have said too, because that's not how my brain works either. I need to collect and gather and sort and categorize, and then it's clear what the shape of the thing is. I can't do the shape first. This is where I'm struggling with writing my current book, because it's the same thing. I have so much information and I'm trying to put it in some sort of coherent shape, because I'm a bottom-up thinker, not a top-down thinker. And Erica talks about how many autistic graduate students likely drop out at a certain point because you're expected to do all of this. Often what we do is we do way more preparation. So to accomplish the dolphin paper, Erica said, okay, I'll hand in an outline, but then went home and researched dolphins and did the paper in advance to do the outline, to write the paper again. And I think Erica says they've something like 18 dissertations worth of research and data to produce one dissertation. So we are constantly doing way more work, burning ourselves out as a result, because our thinking style is a different thinking style, and usually schools and universities don't accommodate for this, even though there are so many strengths that come with this particular thinking style. So you shared this article with me, and I just wanted you to maybe talk about why you felt that this resonated with you.
The very idea of being able to write an outline without knowing the finer details of what's in it, I cannot brain it. Like it is like asking a non-autistic person, what's the smell of number 5? Yeah. Or okay, what's the color of number 9? Yeah, they look at you like you have 5 heads, and I look at them like, you don't know what's the smell of number 5? Yeah. By the way, it's pineapples.
It's basil.
I was going to say orange blossom, but okay.
See, we know instinctively how to answer that question, but for a non-autistic person, the concept of the smell of number 5 is what? Yeah. The same way when my supervisor is so patient with me. He asked me, Roza, please write an outline of how you want to approach your thesis. And I kind of looked at his question and I went, what? Yeah. It's like the equivalent of, what's the smell of number 5 if I'm not autistic? Yeah. And then he tried to help. honest to God, he really tried to help. And this is where I kind of jokingly call it the wrong USB cable problem. He tried to help. And he said, okay, suppose you... I'm laughing because I can't even kind of imagine it because it's so funny. Okay, suppose you're trying to describe your project in an elevator pitch. How would you do it? In my head, I was thinking, I don't speak in elevators ever.
I love you.
So I kind of looked at him blankly.
Yeah.
And then he tried. Oh, I have to give him so much credit. He tries so hard. But this is the thing. You have an education system that is formed with a particular norm in mind. And you have a student that consists of many, many various stratas with different, I won't call it preference. We don't have a choice. It's not like I prefer to think in a bottom-up approach. That's how I think.
Yeah, there's no changing that.
Right.
Well, and one thing in the article that I really related to, I have not presented enough research or published enough research because they always ask you to do the abstract before you've done the research. And Erica talks about that in the article.
What to say before I do the research.
I could make something up, but I'm committed to my words being as precise as possible. I don't want to make up hypothetical findings. Yeah. That's not how I operate. And I've always struggled with my first book, I had to come up with the title before I'd written the book. And I cried for days trying to come up with a title for a book I hadn't written yet. I don't know what it's going to be like. No idea. So that was a very painful process. The titles have always been the things I've done last on papers, on anything that I've ever produced, on plays. The title is the very last thing I type.
Yes, exactly. It's the cherry on the cake, eh?
Yeah.
This is so I have some problems with this article. There's a couple of things I've got some problems with.
Okay. Pray tell.
One, it seems that the author in the article, they talk about the learning style, that we all have the learning style, our learning style. Now, I disagree. I don't think that I've met anybody who has a learning style. Our learning styles are a combination of a whole bunch of different things. And yes, there are some of us will have certain strengths in a visual or an oral or an experiential. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I don't think there is a single person that only does it in one way. And there's a little, the statements they're making is a little dogmatic, and then it rolls into the bottom up, top down. Now,
somebody approach it sideways.
Well, now here's my. I have two parallel thoughts about this. One, the expression of both your two experiences and in the article is not my experience at all with PhD at all. Now, I will say that I was a master's student that was upgraded, so perhaps I missed something. But I've talked enough, and this could be an Australian thing actually. So our thesis proposals were normally asked at the end of the first year or 6 months. Now, PhDs are only research. We don't need to do any of this coursework rubbish. That's just foreign North American stuff.
I know. Why?
And abstracts. I've never been asked for an abstract before I've written the paper. What my experience very much is that you have you do your thesis proposal, but it evolves. And that's the bit that I don't really understand by this article about why is it maybe just a North American system that people are so dogmatic. You've written your abstract and this is what it must be, and you've written your thesis proposal and this is what it must be. Okay, so let's put that aside. That's a cultural thing.
I didn't have the problem with this top-down, bottom-up thing with my first PhD, ironically.
Huh.
The problem I had at the time was I didn't know I was autistic. And in the final year of my PhD, we moved building from a building that has a lighting that suits me very well to a new building with smart fluorescent lighting overhead.
Oh, no.
Oh gosh, I think that contributed greatly to my downfall. So it's a change of environment.
Fluorescence.
But this whole defending or writing an outline or a thesis outline before you do research and having to sit through many courses, you don't have that in my first PhD attempt.
Yeah.
It was pure research. And I think I did very well. And it was the accumulation of not knowing your celiac, you're eating, well, you live in UK, the cheapest form of carbs and food is tend to be wheat-based, right?
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing snowballed into something else.
Wow.
But I did not have problems with formulating research and all that. I did have problem, however, with oral defense.
Yeah. Oh, oral defense, for sure.
That was my downfall, the oral defense. I just froze. At the time, I wasn't hunting. I didn't hunt until I came to Canada when did I move here? 2010. But I already knew, even when I was in school, any form of oral presentation is a really severe stress trigger for me. Mm-hmm. I would end up, after the presentation, I had the recording. It's just a recording. It wasn't live. It wasn't even with the thesis commentary. I couldn't eat anything solid for 4 days.
Wow.
Because it was I'm still in knots inside. I can only start eating today.
Yeah. Wow. Although
I should go to Australia.
Well, the system's probably changed now. That's the other thing. Right?
Yeah. Darn.
Yeah. I was going to say, although I sometimes speak coherently, not always. I experience a lot of stress speaking. Like if I'm not prepared, if I'm a student in a class sharing thoughts, like I have to kind of write down the main points of what I'm going to say, so I don't forget them. Mm. I always worry about whether I'm speaking in a way that is going to be understood by others, because my brain obviously thinks in a lot of tangents. So if I'm prepared, like if I practice a lot, like you practiced, using my theater background, then I'm all right with presentations. But just speaking in general, I'm not that confident in, which is funny because I have a podcast.
We're walking contradictions, all of us.
We are.
Like you kind of really nailed it. This is where I kind of jokingly told Kara that you, me, and Bruce are probably triplets in our past lives because we all love theater. Mm-hmm. That presentation, as I said, it took 18 takes. It has a really elaborate script that took like 20 hours to write because I have to admit that presentation is pure 100% performance. Mm-hmm. I have no memory of what I said. I couldn't understand what I was saying when I said it.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, the anxiety, the adrenaline, you just forget absolutely everything. Usually your stomach goes to shit, you know. It's like,
pardon the pun.
But not really a pun. It's very accurate. No.
I know. And it was, as you said, it was a staged performance, 100%. I am being graded for my merit as a student, as a scholar, as a scientist, based on a not real me. Isn't that mind-blowing?
Mm-hmm. And using a modality that is not always your preferred modality for communication.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think people really could not comprehend the amount of cognitive work that goes into I have ideas. I need to connect it to the ideas have meaning, and the meaning needs to connect to a human language. The human language needs to connect with how am I going to express it in a sentence, the structure of the sentence, the syntax, the grammar, the tone. Okay, now send the signal to my mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, don't forget, you have to breathe while you do all that.
Well, and it's why
It's-
like I would much rather communicate in writing. I love sending emails rather than hate phone calls, dread phone calls. But putting things in writing, I can make sure it reads how I want it to read. I can give the amount of detail, which is usually way more detail than I need to give. But at least I know I'm communicating what I want to be communicating. Yeah.
And this is such a really autistic thing. We hate phone calls.
So we got the phone calls. Get rid of them.
I know why.
I want to go back to the performance just for a second. And here is this is a big fundamental difference between me and the two of you. Although I never got through to the PhD to do the oral defense, that to me is like the easiest thing in the world.
Wow.
I am just, and it's just, I think this is the Bruce personality coming in rather than
coach me.
Well, but I'm not too sure I could, because it's like ever since the very first time I went on stage, it was the easiest thing in the world. And you know, I have literally sight read a show in front of 10,000 people, backing was it the Drifters? I think it was, wow. I just walked on stage. I never, no rehearsal. The music director gave me the music. It doesn't worry me. Well, no, but it's just like, this is actually the Bruce person coming through. And so it's interesting that both of you expressing the interest in the theater, I don't understand why the performance is not easy for you. Now, this is very much the
I have
empathy thing, I think.
Yeah. I have maybe one idea why it might be. It's the idea, or it's the foreknowing that I'm being graded for that performance. And so much of what happens in my future path, in my career as a researcher, as a student, as a scientist, what have you, hinges in how much I can meet that rubric of excellence using a modality I'm not good at. It's this the foreknowledge of being graded. Like, for example, because I know that we're having a podcast, I kind of did a bit of a vocal warm up, and I like singing Phantom of the Opera, for example.
Awesome.
And even if I don't understand what I'm singing, or I call it my echolalia special. It's just stimming, just for stimming's sake. I don't even have to understand what I'm talking or saying. Like, for example, one of the hacks that I did for the presentation is I have this language learning app called Duolingo. And a lot of, there's this, well, if you have the app, you know what I'm talking about. It has this section where you can learn to speak. You listen to whatever thing says, and then you imitate. That is perfect echolalia practice.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, when I say I use Duolingo to, I call it retrain myself to speak, because I found that after COVID, I found speaking is very, very hard. And this is how many languages I'm echolalia-ing.
Wow, you're amazing, Roza.
And
that was like, how many would you say that was? Like
20 something.
Yeah.
And people often say that when I learn a language, whatever the language is, I tend to sound like a native speaker, even though it's not my It's not my first. It's not my native tongue even.
Yeah.
So
so there's a difference. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I
Really?
cannot. Yeah.
Wow.
I have a. I can read French to a pretty high level. My thesis was actually in a French text. I still have a working language of German. I learned Russian, Mongolian, Italian. So those languages,
That is so random. I love it.
I can kind of read them, some to a certain level. At Duolingo, I'll come up to I'll go up. I'll hit a level, and I just cannot go past the level because I can't process the speech quickly enough. And so I can't replicate the speech. So my manager at work is her first language is French. She laughs in a nice way because my pronunciation is like just terrible.
Yeah.
But again, this is the human.
The variability, even.
Like performance for me, absolutely no problems. I can give you a hint with the performance.
Mm-hmm.
I never care what anybody thinks on my performance.
Well, and I think that's the difference because you really don't care.
Yeah.
Like this recording is so much easier for me psychologically. And that's why I think I talk better than when I talk to my supervisor, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not being judged. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. You're with your neurokin.
Oh, warm fuzzies.
Yeah, exactly. I'm mindful of the time and
okay. And I may have just typed something about that.
Yeah, so, I was thinking the same thing. Oh gosh.
Roza, this has been so wonderful. Getting to talk about these things on the podcast. I'm really excited by your research, by the promise of wearables in the future and what they could tell us, especially autistic people, about our health, and especially the idea of being able to track that information at home, not necessarily having to go through all of the stress and executive dysfunction issues of like making appointments, going to appointments, having to communicate with someone who doesn't communicate the way you communicate.
Phone calls to make appointments for fun.
The worst. I can just see this being such a rich potential field. What are your hopes?
Better health access in ways that don't hurt us.
Perfectly said.
Because isn't it ironic that the very place that's supposed to be the place of healing is also one of tremendous pain for many of us? We can fix that.
One of the things I liked about all the things you've talked about is the agency that you're giving us.
Yeah.
Like this is not like I think the concept of wearables predates like 50 years ago. I had to do heart monitoring, but I never got to see what the doctor was seeing.
Yeah,
exactly. You don't get the information from the doctor, and the doctor don't necessarily understand it.
Sure. And I was 12 at the time or 11 at the time, so I probably wouldn't have understood. But that's like in general, it's like in the past, these sort of things have been clinical and siloed. What you're talking about, the fact that you could show the app and saying, look, I can, here's my heart variability and fever, I can see this. This is your research area, but also gives, once you learn to interpret that, it's validating.
Yeah.
And you can advocate better.
Difficulty is not something in my head, right? And I can send it to my doctor, and my doctor say, you need to take a break, kiddo. Otherwise, expletive. We need to be alive. So this is, especially because we can't tell when we're sick.
Yes, we can't always with our poor interoception. Yeah.
So perfect.
And like, I'm thinking about some of my experiences, and anytime I go to my doctors and they try to take my heart rate, my heart just like skyrockets. I'm anxious going to the doctor, even though I love my doctor. And finally he was like, just go every day to the local pharmacy and have your blood pressure tested on the machine that's there. And of course, my heart rate was fine. It's just the setting. I could never get a normal
probably
reading.
The fluorescent office.
Yes, also true. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Like my wearable shows that if I have this on and off, there's a difference of 10 beats per second, 10 beats per minute, sorry.
Well, and
that's
I bet
how
the
much
headphones.
light. Yeah, and that's how much light is stressing me out.
10 beats per minute.
The difference. Like, for example, if I have my goggles on and kind of seated comfortably, reclining on my rocking chair with my legs up on the other end, so my blood pressure is stable, my heart rate is about, right now, about 80 beats per minute. But if I take this off, ow, that hurts.
Well,
it shoots up to 95.
Wow. And I'm thinking about like wearing headphones, like my experience with you, Bruce, where you gave me noise canceling headphones for the first time. And suddenly I was like, oh, I'm so relaxed.
You were so happy.
I was. It was such a transformative experience.
It's such a lifesaver.
Yeah.
I sleep with these on because since getting COVID, I know this sounds really weird. I can hear electricity. I swear I can hear
electricity. Doesn't sound weird. Yeah, yeah. My father can hear electricity. I have to sleep with this on. So it has I call it not quite white noise, but some permutation of that. Yeah. Well,
okay.
I feel like we've had such a great conversation. Thank you so much, especially for being so like generous to be here when I know you're feeling burnt out, and I know that like mouth words are harder, and but you know, you were fantastic, as I expected you would be. So yes, I think we're both just really grateful that you were here and that you have engaged with us so frequently, you know, about the podcast, and then more recently, you know, we've been communicating as friends, which has been really wonderful. So thank you.
Oh, this shaman heart was being born. We have to explain to Bruce about that someday.
Yes,
it's a pleasure to be here, and knowing that even feeling depleted and still trying to recover from staring down a grizzly bear, metaphorically, though it feels physically, knowing that this knowledge can probably help so many other people like us, validates their experience, especially. Like, yes, presentations are scary. School that are not designed for you is stressful, and it shows in the data. And you can kind of, because we have really interoception anyway, you can use this to augment your own self-awareness to make sure you stay healthy. It's like a diabetic having access to a blood glucose monitor. It's essential as that, to me at least. It's a hope.
Hope for the future. Love it.
Save the cheerleader, save the world. Happy jazz hands.
Well, thanks so much. Great speaking to both of you as always. And hope to talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.